Imagine, you're living in this nice, quiet, affluent community, beautiful homes, manicured lawns, that sense of peace and security, right? You know your neighbors. And then imagine that same community just rocked by this string of violent attacks. It culminates in the brutal murder of this 16-year-old boy after a Halloween party. That's the reality for the residents of Gilbert, Arizona, and the surrounding East Valley region. Today we're diving into the case of Preston Lord, a young man whose life was tragically cut short. And we're going to explore these disturbing allegations of a teen gang, known as the Gilbert Goons, operating with, seeming impunity in this seemingly idyllic world. Will justice be served for Preston and the other victims? Well, let's find out.
It's a story that really hits on a deep-seated fear, isn't it? The idea that violence can, just erupt anywhere, even in those places that we believe to be safe, and that the very institutions that we rely on for protection might fail us.
Exactly. It's a case that's gripped the nation. And we're going to unpack it all, starting with the night of the tragedy, October 28th, 2023. Preston attends this massive Halloween party in Queen Creek. Hundreds of kids, the kind of party that's become, almost legendary among high schoolers. But on this night, the festivities, they take a horrifying turn.
It's important to note right from the start that the term Gilbert Goons itself seems to originate from social media and online forums. It's unclear whether this group self-identifies as such or has any formal structure at all. However, the pattern of violence attributed to them suggests a level of organization and premeditation that goes beyond, typical teenage mischief.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. So we have this massive party fueled by social media hype. And earlier that same evening, the police have been called to a disturbance at another party nearby. They respond, but then they're called away to this more urgent situation. It's almost as if fate intervened, leaving this gathering unsupervised at a critical moment.
What's fascinating here is that this seemingly minor detail, right, police being called away, could have had this significant impact on the events that unfolded. It highlights the challenges law enforcement faces in resource allocation. You're constantly having to prioritize, assess which situations pose the most immediate threat, and in this case, that decision may have had unintended and tragic consequences.
About an hour after the police leave that initial party, the 911 calls start pouring in. Preston is found lying unconscious in the street, surrounded by teenagers. Chaos ensues, panic, confusion, and a young life is hanging in the balance.
And this is where the lack of information becomes particularly unsettling for the community. You have this horrific event, this young man fighting for his life, and very few details are being released. It creates this vacuum that's quickly filled with rumors, speculation, and fear.
Right. And it's in this vacuum that the whispers about the Gilbert Goons begin to surface. Witnesses describe a group of teenagers, multiple assailants, often using brass knuckles, descending on Preston in a blitz-style attack. They're described as being well-dressed, driving expensive cars, almost a preppy, privileged image juxtaposed with this brutal act of violence.
This contrast is incredibly jarring, and it speaks to a deeper societal issue. Affluent communities often have this strong sense of self-image, a belief in their own exceptionalism. This can, unfortunately, lead to a blind spot when it comes to recognizing and addressing issues like violence within their own ranks. It's easier to blame outsiders or dismiss it as isolated incidents, rather than confront a potentially uncomfortable truth about their own community.
And that's what makes this case so compelling, right? It challenges our assumptions about where violence can occur and who might be responsible. We have this image of gangs being associated with poverty, deprivation, right? But here we see it manifesting in a completely different context.
Absolutely. And it forces us to confront the complexities of gang psychology. It's not just about socioeconomic factors. It's about the allure of power, control, the sense of belonging that a group like this can provide, even in a community where material needs are seemingly met.
Right. The Goons, according to these initial reports, had been operating for months, targeting random victims in public places, parking lots, fast food restaurants, even other parties. Their calling card was these blitz-style attacks, often using weapons like brass knuckles, leaving their victims traumatized and terrified. And all of it documented, even glorified, on social media.
This is where the conversation about the impact of social media becomes crucial. For many young people, these platforms are an extension of their social lives, a place to seek validation and build their identity. But that same dynamic can also be incredibly dangerous. It can create an echo chamber where violence is normalized, where aggression is rewarded with likes and shares, and where real-world consequences seem to fade into the background.
Yeah, it's a chilling thought. And it leads us to another victim of the Gilbert Goons, a young man named Tristan. Now, Tristan's story is particularly heartbreaking because it highlights a long-term impact of this kind of violence, the trauma that can linger long after the physical wounds have healed.
Trauma, particularly in young people, can have devastating and long-lasting effects. It can impact their sense of safety, their ability to trust, their relationships, their academic performance, even their mental health.
Yeah.
Tristan had this minor disagreement with one of the alleged goons, something that might have been brushed off as, typical teenage drama in another context. But in this case, it escalated into this campaign of harassment and intimidation. He received threats, was harassed at his home, and was ultimately brutally attacked at an In-N-Out. Imagine that. You're just trying to grab a burger, and you become the target of this vicious assault. And what's particularly disturbing is that Tristan's father reported these threats to the school, to the parents of the boy who threatened his son, and was essentially met with indifference. It speaks to a potential blind spot in these affluent communities, a belief that their children are somehow above the law, or that these incidents are just boys being boys.
Yeah, and tragically, it takes Preston's death for law enforcement to really take notice. Suddenly, the Gilbert Police Department is launching multiple investigations into the Goons, and the pieces of this horrifying puzzle start falling into place.
What's interesting here is the shift in public perception. It's no longer just rumors or teenage drama. It's a full-blown criminal investigation. And the community is demanding answers. It raises the question, would things have been different if those initial reports of the Goons' activities had been taken more seriously? Would Preston still be alive?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And as more arrests are made, this horrifying truth emerges. Preston's death was not an isolated incident, but potentially the culmination of this year-long reign of terror by the Gilbert Goons.
This revelation is crucial because it shifts the narrative from this single tragic event to this, systemic problem. It forces the community to confront the fact that this violence had been festering beneath the surface, potentially enabled by a culture of silence and complicity.
7 suspects are eventually arrested in connection with Preston's death, all teenagers and young adults, all allegedly linked to the Gilbert Goons. And what's striking is the almost casual cruelty displayed in their alleged social media posts, boasting about the violence, sharing videos of the attacks. It's almost as if they reveled in the brutality.
And the alleged cover-up, if proven, could have serious legal ramifications. Obstruction of justice charges could be brought against the parents, and witnesses, like Ashley Reynolds, might be granted immunity in exchange for their testimony. This case could set a precedent for how far affluent families can go to shield their children from consequences.
Yeah. And amidst all this digital bravado, the alleged motive for Preston's attack emerges: a stolen necklace. This seemingly insignificant item becomes the catalyst for this brutal, senseless act that ends a young life.
While a stolen necklace might seem trivial, it's important to remember that within teenage social circles, symbols of status and belonging can hold, immense weight. This act, seemingly minor to adults, could have been perceived as this, grave offense within their social hierarchy, leading to an escalation of violence.
It's a heartbreaking reminder that sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time can have fatal consequences. And as the suspects plead not guilty, the focus shifts to their families, particularly Talleyranders. Whispers of a cover-up begin to circulate, attempts to send them out of the country, discussions of protecting their business interests above all else.
This is where the theme of privilege and its potential to corrupt justice comes into sharp focus. The allegations against Talon's family suggest a belief that wealth and influence can shield them from consequences, that they can manipulate the system to protect their own.
And we see this play out in various ways. From the attempt to, valet their car at court to the alleged silencing of employees who witness these discussions, it paints this disturbing picture of a family seemingly more concerned with preserving their image than seeking accountability. This seemingly minor detail speaks volumes about the sense of entitlement that pervades this case. It's as if they believe the rules don't apply to them, that even a courthouse should bend to their convenience. How can the community have faith in a just outcome when faced with such blatant disregard for the process?
It raises uncomfortable questions about the role of power and privilege in our justice system. Does wealth create a perception of immunity? Does it influence how investigations are conducted or how cases are prosecuted? These are issues that we as a society need to grapple with, honestly and openly.
And as this story continues to unfold, it's those very questions that linger in the minds of the East Valley community. While some are relieved that arrests have been made, there's this palpable sense of unease, a feeling that the full truth may never be revealed.
That feeling is understandable. given the allegations of a potential cover-up. It creates a sense of distrust, a belief that the system may be rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful. And that distrust can erode the very fabric of a community, making it difficult to heal and move forward. It's like a wound that, never fully closes. The scars, they remain, a constant reminder of the violence and the lingering questions about accountability. And what about the broader issue of youth violence, especially in affluent communities? Is this an isolated incident, or is it a symptom of a larger problem?
Yeah, that's the question that keeps coming up, isn't it? We tend to associate gang violence with poverty, but this case, it really challenges that perception.
It does. It forces us to acknowledge that violence can manifest in any community.
Hmm.
Regardless of, socioeconomic status, there's this myth that affluence somehow insulates you from these problems. But the reality is young people everywhere face challenges, pressure to succeed, social isolation, mental health issues.
Right. And in this case, you can see how those pressures might have been amplified by the environment these kids were in. The constant need to project a certain image, the emphasis on material possessions, that sense of entitlement that can sometimes come with privilege.
Absolutely. And when you combine those factors with the allure of social media, the desire for validation, attention, it can create a dangerous mix. We see it time and time again. Young people engaging in risky behavior, pushing boundaries, seeking that rush of adrenaline, all for the chance to go viral, to be seen as powerful or cool.
It's like they're living their lives for an online audience, not for themselves. And the consequences, as we've seen in this case, can be devastating.
Yeah. And what's particularly challenging about addressing youth violence in affluent communities is that it often goes unreported or minimized. There's a tendency to dismiss these incidents as like teenage hijinks or to attribute them to individual bad actors rather than systemic issues.
It's like sweeping the dirt under the rug, right? Hoping it will magically disappear. But as we've seen in this case, ignoring the problem only allows it to fester and grow, potentially with tragic consequences.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial for communities to be proactive, to create environments where young people feel safe reporting incidents of violence or harassment. Think about it. If Tristan had felt comfortable coming forward sooner, if his concerns had been taken seriously, maybe things could have been different.
It's a chilling thought, and it really underscores the need for greater awareness, not just among young people, but also among parents, educators, community leaders. Everyone has a role to play in creating a culture where violence is not tolerated.
It's about shifting the mindset, moving away from this boys will be boys mentality, and recognizing that aggression, even in its seemingly minor forms, can have serious consequences.
So what can we do? How do we prevent something like this from happening again?
Well, there's no, easy answer, of course. But I think it starts with open and honest conversations, talking to our kids about the dangers of social media, about the importance of empathy and respect, about healthy ways to cope with stress and conflict.
Right. And it's about being proactive, not just reactive, investing in mental health resources, providing opportunities for positive social engagement, creating a sense of community where young people feel supported and valued.
Yeah. And it's about holding everyone accountable. Regardless of their socioeconomic status, justice should be blind. And the consequences for violent actions should be applied equally, whether you're driving a Tesla or taking the bus.
That's a powerful message. And as we move towards the end of this deep dive, it's clear that the case of Preston Lord and the Gilbert Goons is about so much more than just one tragic event.
It's a microcosm of larger societal issues, the allure and dangers of social media, the role of privilege and power in our justice system, and the urgent need to address the root causes of youth violence.
Right. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our communities. And as we move forward, it's essential to keep those truths in mind, to continue the conversation, and to work towards creating a world where a young life like Preston's is never again cut short by senseless violence.
And that's where the real challenge lies, translating our outrage and sorrow into meaningful action. It's about demanding accountability from our institutions, supporting organizations that work to prevent youth violence, and engaging in open and honest conversations about these difficult issues with our families, friends, and communities.
It's a call to action for all of us, to be more than just observers, to be active participants in creating a safer and more just world for our young people.
Because ultimately, their future is our future, and the choices we make today will determine the kind of world we leave behind.
It's about recognizing that, we're all interconnected. What happens in one community, it can have these ripple effects far beyond its borders. And this case, as shocking and disturbing as it is, can serve as a wake-up call for all of us, It forces us to ask ourselves some tough questions. What kind of world are we creating for our young people? What messages are they absorbing from social media, from their peers,
Yeah.
from, the adults in their lives?
Those are the questions, yeah, those are the questions we need to be grappling with. And it's not just about protecting our own children. It's about creating a society where all young people, have the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their background or circumstances. We can't just sit back and hope that these problems will solve themselves. We have to be actively engaged in finding solutions.
So where do we go from here? What can we as individuals do to make a difference?
Well, I think it starts with awareness, educating ourselves about the, root causes of youth violence, understanding the role that social media plays in shaping attitudes and behaviors, recognizing the signs of trouble, right, before it's too late.
And it's about having those difficult conversations with our children, with our friends, with our neighbors, breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health, challenging the, glorification of violence that we see so often in our culture.
Yeah, we need to create a climate where young people feel safe coming forward, where they know they'll be supported, not judged or dismissed. And we need to hold our institutions accountable, schools, law enforcement, the justice system, to ensure that they're doing everything in their power to protect our children and to address these issues proactively.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we'll leave you with this challenge. Don't let Preston Lord's story be just another headline that fades from memory. Let it be a catalyst for change, a reminder that we all have a responsibility to create a safer, more just, and compassionate world for our young people.
Because ultimately, their future is our future. And the choices that we make today, they will determine the kind of world we leave behind. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a tough conversation, but, I think an important one. And we hope that you'll continue to think about these issues, talk about them with your friends and family, and most importantly, take action in your own communities to help create a better future for all young people.
That's right. We all have a role to play in this, and we hope that this deep dive has inspired you to do your part.